Welcome to the Refined Sisterhood podcast, friend. We are Maddie and Kay, and our hearts are to rally around you, celebrate your season, and encourage you as you lean into the calling that the Lord has for you.
We share biblical encouragement, tangible advice, and lots of real life as we grow closer to Jesus. We want to be a safe space that you leave feeling loved, cared for, and served.
So grab your coffee, have a notebook handy, and let's hang out and indulge in some joyful conversations.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Refined Sisterhood podcast. I'm Maddie, and this is Kaitlin, and we are back in this new season, and we are so excited. And today we have one of our good friends on the podcast. And Kaitlin, would you like to introduce her?
Yes. So I'm really excited because this is a friend that is like a friend of a friend growing up, and we've gotten really close over the last few years, and she's just really cool, and she's honestly really funny. And I love her so much. But her name is Elizabeth. Elizabeth Sustar is a pastor's wife, boy mama, and a passionate storyteller who isn't afraid to share the raw and real parts of her faith journey. Over the past 2 years, she and her husband have walked through deep trials, witnessed undeniable miracles, and clung to the prophetic promises God has spoken over their lives, even in the face of church hurt and wilderness seasons. Elizabeth's heart is to encourage others who are in the middle of their own not yet seasons. She brings a message of honest hope that God is faithful, still speaks, and always finishes what he starts. When she's not chasing after her 2 little boys or supporting her husband in ministry, you'll find her gardening, doing Pilates, exploring new coffee shops, or making TikToks about motherhood, faith, and finding beauty in the everyday. Welcome to the podcast, Elizabeth. We're so excited.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this for months, so I'm really excited. I can't wait.
Yay. Well, we're literally going to let you dive into your story. Elizabeth has lots that she wants to share with us, and we're really excited. So if you just want to go ahead, take the floor, let us know where you've been, where you are now, what you're walking through, and what the Lord's teaching you right now.
Yeah, so like you just said, my husband is a pastor. We've been married for almost 7 years at this point, and so we have experienced a lot of ministry together. Even before we were married, we went to church together. We were super involved in the same youth group, and so, we've just walked through a lot of church experiences, ministry experiences, God experiences, all the things. And over the last, I would say about 2.5 years or so, we have just really been on a journey. In early 2023, we were at a church that we had been at for a very long time, a church, honestly, we loved. We loved the people. We both worked there. We loved the people that we worked with. We loved the community that was there. We just kind of felt in our spirit that it was time for us to leave. There were a lot of conversations that we had with different leaders in our life. My husband talked to a lot of mentors that he has to kind of, gauge okay, are we just overthinking this, or, what's your thoughts here? And everyone pretty much said the same thing. They were all like, no, I think you're right with those feelings. And so after months and months and months of talking to people and praying, fasting, all of the things, we left that church, and we actually ended up moving across the state to Charleston to go to a church down there. It was a huge leap of faith. I joke that one of the biggest things was that we left our house that we bought in 2019 that was at a really good interest rate and a really good mortgage. And sometimes I'm like, we should have rented that and just moved back in later, but we didn't know, if or when we would ever come back. So it just made sense at the time to sell it, which we, still we believe in that moment that was the right decision. But we left our house, we left our family, we left the jobs that we loved, and a lot of what felt like stability. We kind of followed God, and I joked with Evan, I said, it feels like we have followed God and he told us jump off a cliff, but I'm gonna catch you, but also you're gonna fall a little bit. You know what I mean? And so we followed God to Charleston. There were a lot of crazy doors that opened for us in order for us to go to Charleston. A lot of connections that very naturally just happened for Evan to find a job down there at a church. And then also a huge thing was that I needed a job. Now we have two little boys. Back then we just had one. And I was always very lucky to be remote, and we didn't have to worry about childcare. So that was a huge priority for us, was continuing whether I get a remote job or something that is mostly remote, because one, childcare is very expensive. And we're going on ministry salaries. So, we probably can't afford it anyways. So we really needed something that was going to be flexible with having children. And that very, very naturally also opened up for me to be able to have a job to support us also going to Charleston so Evan could take the job at the church down there. And so it was very crazy. Our house in Anderson sold very, very quickly. I think it was under contract within, I want to say like 3 days. We had like 12 offers. It was so crazy. And that was just like, I felt like another huge blessing upon itself, was being able to just like sell our house quickly and everything kind of going as smoothly as it felt like it was going. When we moved to Charleston, the first several months that we were there, I had like debilitating anxiety. It was just such a huge, going from a place of feeling very stable and very comfortable. And then, like I said, it's like you jump off a cliff and you're like, oh, nothing is stable anymore. So we moved right into a apartment complex, trying to figure out if we could afford a house in Charleston. And that was the goal, was to buy a house, but we didn't really know at the time. So going from a house to an apartment with a child, and then I only worked part-time previously, and then I was going into a full-time job, starting a new job. It was just a lot of new stuff and new experiences at once, and it was kind of like trying to adjust to all of that was just felt like a lot. And so I had really bad anxiety. I mean, to the point where I was having insomnia. And it was a terrible, terrible experience. I even went to the doctor at one point because I was like, I cannot continue to live like this. It's so awful. And months into us being there, due to just the stress that I think we were both under from everything just being so crazy and like our lives being shifted so dramatically, Evan and I kind of both just looked at each other and were like, are we sure we did the right thing? Like, this is so crazy and we're so stressed out. Are we sure that this is what God was wanting us to do? And then we also had left our family and friends behind. And so we kind of were also becoming very lonely during all of that. And what's crazy is one night we looked at each other, we had this long conversation, kind of questioning, honestly, God, and being like, are we sure we were listening correctly? Like, did we do the right thing? And the very next day, my husband was at work, and his grandfather, who he is close with, but they don't talk, it's not like a daily, they're talking to each other all the time. He randomly calls him and just kind of says, I feel like God wants me to tell you something. And my husband tells me about it, obviously, like right afterwards. But the whole entire, everything that he said was almost a direct response to things we were saying in our private conversation the day before.
Wow.
And not only that, so his grandfather ended up like texting us the word from God, both so we could have it. He was like, you need to have this so you can reflect on it as you go through this journey. And what's crazy is in that moment, we really needed that word, but we had no idea how much we would need that a year later. We had no idea how many things in that word were providential to what was going to come. And that word has honestly, truly been such an anchor for us throughout this whole entire journey and this whole entire season that we've been in. Um, so we had that word, and we felt very comforted by it. And I can honestly, I'll just share what some of it said. I don't want to share the whole thing, but it talked about, us going through a season of loneliness. It used the phrasing despair and desperation, which was funny in the moment. I felt like I was having a lot of anxiety. So I was like, oh, it's talking about that. And I joked with my husband the other day. I said, if I knew what else was going to happen, I think I would have read that and been actually scared. I would have been like, wait a minute, hold on. Like, I don't think I can handle that, you know? Um, but anyway, so he kind of talked about us going through loneliness and despair, and then saying that, you know, we were going to be walking through a season in the wilderness, but God was always going to provide for us exactly when we need it, and that God's hand was basically over us and he's with us. And just like, that's kind of what the word essentially said. And so we've had a lot of very prophetic things that were in that word happen even since we got it over the last year. And it's been, again, such an anchor to be able to have that. And I'm just really thankful that there are people who give words like that. Because if I've been walking through the stuff that we've walked through the last like 6 to 8 months and I didn't have that word, I actually think I would really, really be questioning God. And I would be having a harder time than even what I've been having. But anyway, so fast forward a little bit, we got that word. That was January of 2024, when we received that. And months and months later, I got pregnant with our second son. The pregnancy was going pretty great. I mean, I was uncomfortable as any pregnant lady is. And it was the summer, so it was hot, and you know, it's my second kid, and so I'm just like chasing around a toddler while being pregnant and nauseous and all the things. And September rolls around. Hurricane Helene comes through in the upstate and kind of like destroys, honestly, a lot of like the mountains and everything. And we had actually planned on going there for our anniversary, which was in October. And so it got rescheduled, and we ended up just going to Greenville, South Carolina for like a little weekend. And while we were there, we found out that I was going to be losing my job. Essentially, there was just some financial things that went down within the company, and pretty much everyone lost their job because of it, which was very, very, it was honestly shocking. Um, I remember exactly, we were on our anniversary trip, and I remember exactly where I was sitting in a coffee shop when I heard this information, and I kind of was like, no, that's not going to happen. Like, there's no way, you know, especially because I was like, God provided this job for me.
Yeah.
And also, the whole reason we were able to come to Charleston was because of this job, really, ultimately. Um, and so I was like, he wouldn't take it away. Like, he would never do that. That doesn't make sense, you know? So I had a really hard time kind of trying to process all of that. And so ended up losing my job. The place I worked for, they were actually very kind. They kept me paid for longer than they probably should have. Probably knowing I was pregnant and about to have a baby, because this was in October and I was due in December. Um, and so that was just like a very jolting experience, because I was like, okay, I'm about to have a baby. I am about to have to job hunt while I am either pregnant or newly have a baby, and then I probably am not going to get a maternity leave the way that I thought it was going to be. Everything was just not in my head going the way I thought it should have went.
Right.
I was supposed to have 3 months of maternity leave, and I was thinking, well, I'm gonna, you know, have time off, and I get to take my kids to the beach, and like it'll be so relaxing. And it was the complete opposite experience. And so I lost my job, and my husband and I just kind of looked at each other, and we had a couple weeks of just trying to process and talk with people and pray and figure out, okay, like, what do we do here? Because I had a really wonderful job and wonderful, just everything. The pay was great and stuff. And I also don't have a college education. And so we knew that either God was going to have to provide another miracle job, or we were just like, my husband was going to have to find something else to help support us financially. And it finally got to a place where we were like, that seems to be the only thing that could make the most sense. If we move back to the upstate, our family's here, our friends are here, we have a lot of connections where we could both get jobs potentially, rather than like in the low country, we literally didn't know anyone. And so it just, in our heads at the time, that just made the most sense, was like, I think we're going to have to leave. And so, I think it was end of October, my husband went and he told his place of work, which was a church, hey, you know, this is what's going on. My wife lost her job. I'm going to have to find, and they had already told him they couldn't pay him more when he was hired. So we kind of felt like that was off the table. He was just like, I'm going to have to find something else. I'm telling you guys because I want you guys to have a heads up so you know, you can have time to find someone else. We don't want to just leave because especially in church world, that can be seen as disrespectful if you just leave and not tell them, or
Right.
even if you give a 2 weeks. I mean, it's very normal to give, I mean, lead pastors have given their congregations like a 6 month notice or more at times. So they have time to find someone to replace them. And so we really agreed mutually, like this was a respect thing, and we truly want to be respectful to them and to that congregation and be like, hey, we feel like we've got no choice. We've got to put like our kids first. And Evan was like, I've got to put my wife first. She's about to give birth. Like she's about to have a baby, and I'm the man. I've got to provide for us financially. So we told them, and we were under the impression, honestly, for several weeks, I think it was almost a month, that everything was fine. And they were okay with that. We had even in our heads thought like, we don't know how long it will take for our house to sell or us to find a job, because we hadn't really been job hunting yet. We were just kind of like trying to figure out what was going on. Our house was not on the market, nothing. And so we really were trying to take it slow and do the right thing. And about a month after my husband had shared kind of what was going on with his boss, he randomly tells him one day, it was like a Monday morning, like, sorry, the people at the church have decided you've got to be out by like January. It was like the first week of January, or I think he said January 1st.
Right.
And I was due December 25th. And so, you know, with pregnancies, you can very easily go over, you can go longer, you can go, you know, you never know.
Yeah.
And so I kind of was like, our insurance was through my husband's job. And so I just immediately was like, what if I have him January 1st or January 2nd? And then the insurance, we don't have insurance, you know? So there
Right.
was, and then obviously the income, and then we still had a house, we still had a mortgage, all this stuff. So it was just very, very shocking. We felt very blindsided by it, because we were very much under the impression that everything was fine. And so around that time, I think it was actually, this was right before Thanksgiving that happened. And then immediately the week after Thanksgiving, we put our house on the market. I called my realtor the same day that my husband found out this information, because we were like, we have this mortgage, and at this point we're moving, so let's just get rid of it, you know, that type of thing, so we don't have to pull from our savings or whatever. And so that was kind of the first thing. So we put our house on the market very quickly, and that's kind of where I feel like everything just started to just go crazy, honestly. So our house was on the market. Thankfully, it actually sold very, very quickly, and I firmly believe that was a God thing. Um, we found out actually just about a month ago that the people who bought our home was another pastor and his wife, younger like us. She was pregnant, and they also had a toddler. And apparently, there's a large church in Charleston called Seacoast, and he had been hired by them to start a campus in the neighborhood that we lived in, actually. And they had been looking for a house for months and months and months and had not found one. And ours came on the market, and they apparently walked into our house and immediately were like, this is it. This is where we're supposed to be. And we found out, I know, isn't that crazy? And we found out this information because some friends that we had met, like honestly by chance, in Charleston, that we became very close with, a family member of this friend became very good friends with the people who bought our house, and they didn't realize it until later. They were all talking to each other, and she was like, wait a minute, that's my friend's house. She just sold, like they just sold that house. And so it was just, that felt like such a God thing, because it almost was, it felt so special to know that like even though we were having a really hard time, God was like providing through our like trial, providing for these people who needed this, and not only providing for them, but also they were there to start a church. And so it was also like ministry that they were coming in to do. It just felt like such a cool thing. And like, what are the odds that they end up being friends with people that we know out of all the millions of people that live in Charleston? It was just such a cool thing. It just felt it was like confirmation from God of like, okay, wait, no, this is God. Like God's got his hand in our lives, and he knows what he's doing, you know? But anyway, so our house sold, we went under contract, and actually around the same time I was developing symptoms for preeclampsia, which, if you don't know, it's basically high blood pressure that can cause you to like have a stroke, and it can be very, very dangerous for both you and the baby. So I was having a lot of high blood pressure readings. I was having to be rushed to labor and delivery multiple times. Even at one point for Thanksgiving, we were in Charlotte with my family, and I had to go to labor and delivery in Charlotte. And I never knew, honestly, when or if, like, when I was having my baby. I would go thinking I might have him now if they have to, induce me or rush me to have a C-section, depending on how everything's looking. And so I ended up having to be induced early at 37 weeks. So that was early December instead of December 25th. And it was like about a week before I was gonna be induced, the church that we were a part of down there had a Christmas party. And I was on bed rest. I actually wasn't even supposed to go. But I remember my husband and I were talking, and we were so honestly just shocked that, because they knew I was pregnant, obviously. They knew when I was due, and it just felt like, how could you we don't have jobs, and it felt like they were like taking away our income and also maybe our insurance, knowing all of this information. At least that's the way it felt to us and kind of the way it appeared. And so they had this Christmas party, and I went to it, and I was so uncomfortable, like physically, because I was just, I literally was like several days away from having to be induced. But I remember I looked at my husband, and I was like, no, I'm going to go because I have to look them in the face, because I just can't believe it. Where I wanted to almost like see how you interact with me. Like, do you feel guilty? Like, do you feel any sort of like emotion towards this? And the whole time we were there, we noticed it appeared to be that everyone there felt very confused. I remember somebody asked my husband, like, oh, do you have a job? And he was like, no. And the person who asked him that kind of was like, you could just tell they seemed genuinely confused and almost concerned, not in like a that nobody ever was rude or unkind at all. And it was very just kind of strange. And so I remember we got back in the car to drive back home, and I just looked at him and I was like, something's happened. I don't know what's happened, but I don't know if there's been some sort of miscommunication or somebody's lied about something. I have no idea. But I just genuinely believe that some of these people, I don't believe that they did this to hurt us. Like, I don't know what's happened here. And so we kind of mutually decided, like, we don't know what's happened. Decisions have already been made at this point. Our house is already under contract. At this point, we're moving no matter what. And we also had not shared with anyone really that I was having all these preeclampsia issues. And we honestly like had moments where we were scared for both like my life and our baby's life. And so we just had a lot going on personally where we were just like, I don't know what's going on there. We're going to let God handle that. And we're just going to focus on trying to like protect our family and figure out what's going on and doing what's best for like our finances and just like trying to find a job and all of these things. And so ended up being induced at 37 weeks, and he was born December 12th. And while we were actually in the hospital, my husband ended up getting 2 job offers at once, which was amazing. But it was kind of funny because the whole time we were in the hospital, he was just like on the phones. I felt like it was not, my hospital experience felt very surreal. It felt like a dream because it was just like, you're in such a state of just like shock, and like going back, bringing our baby back to our house wasn't like a sweet moment of like, oh, look, his nursery. Like, his nursery was in boxes. Everything was chaos. Everything was in boxes. We had family coming to like help us move or like help watch our toddler so we could, take our newborn to doctor's appointments. It just was very chaotic. And so even the hospital stay didn't feel as like peaceful, maybe. Not that they always feel the most peaceful because you've got nurses coming in and stuff all the time, but it didn't feel as like maybe as sweet as it should have felt. And so my husband got 2 job offers, and one of them actually was at a church in the upstate, and our old youth pastor is actually the pastor at this church. And so we just felt really good about that decision. And so he ended up taking that job. God provided that for him. And that was honestly, that was such a blessing and a huge miracle. My husband went even as far as he was looking at jobs outside of ministry because he was like, I just have to protect my family and I've got to provide for them. Like, if that means I've got to go work in insurance or, sales or whatever, he was like, I'll do it. I don't care. And so it also was just cool because, you know, I understand his perspective of wanting to provide, but also I know him and I'm like, you're not going to be happy doing anything else. And so I kind of was like, God, please just provide him a ministry job because I just know long term that's not going to be, I don't think, a solution for him working something else. Um, Anyway, so I was about 4 weeks postpartum when we moved, and we moved into my grandmother's basement, which is actually still where we are currently. And a lot of people, when I tell them that, I think are like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. And don't get me wrong, it's hard. We're living out of boxes, and, especially having a newborn, you don't have your own space or your own environment, and you're in postpartum. And then my husband had a job, but I was still job hunting and having interviews and just doing all this stuff. And and it has been very stressful, but actually, as we've been here, it has been such a huge blessing. My grandmother lost her husband, my grandfather, in early 2023, and she is still grieving, as anyone who probably has lost their spouse does. And she is like the only person who has really truly, other than my husband, has really truly been able to understand what I've been feeling and what I've been going through, because there's been throughout all of this, there's been a lot of hurt, church hurt, or even just like hurt where you feel like, God, why did you do this? Like, I trusted you. I gave you everything, it feels like. I quit my job. My husband quit his job. We gave you our mortgage. We gave up our house. And in a way, we gave up our family dynamic that we had to go and follow you. And I kind of felt like betrayed. Like, why? Like, I trusted you. And I guess in my head, I thought, oh, well, when you trust God, everything goes perfect. And that's just what I've learned is like not always the case.
No.
And it doesn't mean that you did anything wrong, and it doesn't mean that God isn't there with you, but it's like it's not always going to go maybe exactly the way you want. But what I have learned is it always ends up better than you could have imagined. And that doesn't take away from the fact that it's really difficult. But anyway, she has been such an anchor and such a blessing throughout all of this. And I think honestly, both of us have been able to kind of like support each other, because going through all the confusion and the hurt and honestly grief that I've been experiencing, I've had to grieve what I thought like my motherhood would look like, especially with a second baby. Because in my head for months, I had put together this nursery and he never got to see it. And, you know, I, I in my head thought I was going to have a maternity leave, and I didn't get that. And like just having a baby that's having to live out of boxes also. And I know he doesn't care, he's a baby, but it's just still, it's like, you don't want your baby to have to deal with that, or you don't want your toddler or your child to have to go through that. And so there's a lot I've also been having to kind of grieve and process. And then when you go through something that feels very traumatic, it almost like shuts off all of the kind of decision making sensors in your brain. And so I've had a really hard time making decisions, even like small little decisions. And I've had a hard time even talking to people about it, because I think some people are like, just make a decision. Like, what are you talking about? But she's the only person who when I told her that, she just looked at me and was like, I know exactly what you're talking about. She was like, that's happened to me. It's like, you're like, I don't know, it's too much. It's just like so much is going on, and you're so worried that you're going to mess something up. You're going to do something wrong, and you think you have that much control over your life to like do that. But it's been such a blessing in hindsight, and I know one day, even when we do move out and are able to do that, we will reflect very fondly on this, even though it's been really hard. There's a lot of memories that are being made and things I'm really grateful for. And so we moved in with her, and we've still been living with her. We've had a lot of roadblocks kind of since then, especially regarding housing stuff. It's so funny. We've bought 2 houses. We bought one in Charleston and then one in the upstate when we first got married. And we never had as much pushback as I feel like we've had trying to buy a house this time. And we've got to the point where we're like, either like the enemy is fighting us, or God is directly being like, stop. for some reason, and we don't know why. But and a lot of this journey has felt like trying to trust God when you actually don't see an ending. You don't see, God is good, and we have like a word from him that tells us like kind of an ending. It tells us, God's going to provide for us, and miracles and stuff like that, but you don't know when, and you don't know what, and you don't know, when you go through something really difficult, it's you could become like analysis paralysis. Everything you look at becomes scary because you're like, what if I do something wrong? Or what if I make the wrong decision here and then I get punished for it? And trying to like process all of that. But it's been such a huge faith journey that when we first started walking through it, and something, whether it was crazy, like a miracle God provided in such a cool way, or it would be something negative that would happen, I would look at my husband and it was kind of a joke at first. I would say, this is going to be great for the book. This is just so good. Great. Especially when it was something bad, I'd be like, this is good. Let's write it down. I don't want to forget. This is like a page turner,
Yes, girl.
And so as time has went on, though, that actually, it's truly started out as a joke, but then it's actually turned into like a very serious thing now, where I'm like, I have been writing down everything, every positive. I mean, even like little things, like I think it was right before we moved, my husband's car got hit by a dump truck in a parking lot. And just like even little
That sounds about right. Honestly, like it just sounds
brand.
like when
It's
it
on
rains,
brand.
when it rains, it pours.
Right, exactly. You're just like, okay, awesome. And so it's just like things like that. And I have written down every single one of them. And I was telling my husband the other day, I said, I write down these things for a couple of reasons. One is because when you do go through something really hard or traumatic, it's easy to forget. Your brain like can cut it out, and so you can forget some things sometimes. And I don't want to forget, but also I don't want to forget because I want to be able to look at every single thing, whether I can look at it now and say something positive came from it, or one day I know I'm going to be able to. But I don't want to forget any of these little details, because if and when hopefully we do write a book one day, I want to be able to look at even these little things and say, yes, this thing happened and it was huge and very like, felt very earth shattering to us. Or maybe this little thing happened here, but like, look what God did and look how God provided here. And so a huge blessing is that not one time have we had to touch our savings account throughout all of this. You guys probably know it takes a long time to build up an emergency fund. It took, I think, about 4 to 5 years of our marriage to do all of that. And so when you have it, you're like, I don't want to touch it. Like, I know it's there, but you're like, oh, I don't want to have to then, do it again. And so that was a huge blessing. Our house sold very quickly. We had people, I mean, our small group that we had in Charleston that actually was at a different church that we went to, they became such a kind, and honestly like impactful group of people that when we left, we were like, if we were there for anything, it was to meet them, because they have changed our lives significantly, and we cannot be the same people since we've met them. They fully surrounded us. I mean, they threw me like a baby shower, and I didn't ask them to do that. And they were so supportive of us when we were in the hospital. They were supportive of us when we were moving. They brought us food. We even had family members of the people in our small group who we did not even know send us cards with gift cards to like Publix for groceries. My parents would deliver groceries to our house. My in-laws came and helped with our toddler and helped us move. My parents helped us move. We had other family members like just very, very kindly give us money to cover whether it was moving costs or like the mortgage that we had to pay in January, because we didn't close until January. And so we were extremely, extremely blessed and lucky. And even though a lot of people look at like having to move back in with family as maybe a negative thing, it's like we otherwise would either be homeless, truly, or we would have to live somewhere and truly like be pulling from our savings to pay the mortgage or to pay the rent, or be going into debt for it. And it's like, yes, it's hard, but also my grandmother, even though she hasn't been giving us, mortgage money every month or whatever, in a way, she's been paying a mortgage for us by allowing us to live there. And, we've tried to pay her to live there, and she has literally refused. She's like, no, you keep that money, whatever. And so like that's another huge, honestly, miracle, is like the fact that someone has space for us and is allowing us to even be there so we can just get our feet back on the ground is a huge miracle, and a huge way that God has provided. In the word specifically, it that we were given, it compared what we would be walking through to a season of wilderness, very similar to the Israelites. There were a lot of things in there phrased about kind of like what the Israelites went through. And then it said that God will always provide manna exactly when you need it. And a few months ago, when we first moved, I was such in a frantic mode of just trying to fix everything. I wanted to feel stable again. I wanted financial stability. I wanted a house. I wanted to get out of this situation entirely and never look back. And I was doing anything I could to try to make that happen. I was trying to piece together jobs. I was trying to force things to happen. I mean, we were actually under contract on a home that we knew in our souls we should not buy this house, and we ended up backing out of it. But we were just doing anything possible to try to like force things. And I had a moment like a month and a half into it where I was walking on this trail in Greenville, and all of a sudden it was just like God was like, I have literally told you, like, not just through the Bible, but also in this word that I've given to you guys, I have told you that I'm going to provide for you. And why are you trying to like force everything? And what's funny is every time I've tried to force it, it hasn't worked. Every time I've tried to like make things happen and, make this job happen or make this house happen or like whatever it is, it has not worked. It's never worked. All it's done is stressed me out and honestly drove me crazy. That's all it's done. It's impacted my life very negatively more than anything. But honestly, it's a moment, and I know it is, that God is like, you've got to let go. And I know it's hard. It's so hard for me to do that because you want to have control over your own life and your own situation, especially when it's, your kids are involved. But it's just like, God is literally telling me, he's told me, like, I'm going to provide for you. And also he's proven that he has, like, through everything I just said. It's like, our house sold quickly. My husband was able to get a job. Like, everything's been provided for. And he's like, you've got to chill. Like, I've told you that I'm going to do this. But it's hard still when you're like, yeah, but like when, like, or how, or like, you know what I mean? You're like, what's going on? And you want to be out of the situation so bad, but it's like really having to let go and fully trust God is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And it's such a hard thing to walk through, but also I feel like he has been teaching me so much throughout all of this. And then even in the word that we were given, there's a specific phrase in there that actually says that like people will marvel at God's providential hand once basically all of this is said and done. And I had this moment where I was kind of like reading over that just for like encouragement. I was just reading that whole word that we were given. And for some reason, the word providential stuck out to me. And so I was like, well, let me Google what providential means. And so I Googled it, and it means something miraculous and unforeseen. And I just had this, it was just like this moment that God just like spoke to me when I read that. And he was like, I've told you, one, that I'm going to provide for you. And I've also, like, specifically, I use the word providential, which means unforeseen and miraculous, which essentially means it's nothing that you can do.
Yeah.
And I just had this moment where it was almost like brought me to tears, where I was just like, I have wanted control this whole time. And I've had moments where I really thought like, oh no, I definitely, like, God's got it. Like, I'm not worried. Like, everything's fine. Like, I'm not, but that wasn't true. Like, I was still trying to force things. I was still constantly, having anxiety about my situation or worried about it and talking about it, stressing and all these things. And it was just this moment of like, providential literally means unforeseen and miraculous. And if it's unforeseen, I can't see it. There's nothing I can do to try to pull it out of the air. I can't see it. And if it's miraculous, God can obviously give people the ability to do miracles, but the way it's phrased and the way I feel like God was speaking to me is like, I'm going to do a miracle for you, and it's not going to be anything that you can do or that you can see. And that was just something that I really needed to hear, walking through all of this, feeling financially unstable, or even honestly kind of dealing with, worried about like, oh, well, what if people like see this and think they messed up. They shouldn't have followed God because look what's happening to them. And, and then you start to doubt yourself, and you start to honestly doubt God when you hear those things or when you think of those things. But truly, I'm like, we're still in this right now. There has not been, I don't have like a super, oh, well, then all this wonderful stuff happened and everything's perfect and it's great. But I also like, God has literally told me that it is going to be. And so really like, this whole journey has been, like I said earlier, just such a faith journey of us trying to walk through a season of truly feeling like you're in the wilderness. Like even moments where we've been in the thick of it and we've looked at each other, or I've said to God, I'm like, God, why did you bring me here? I'm like, why did, like, literally like the Israelites, how they said, God, why did you bring us here to die? Send us back to Egypt because at least we had food. That's how I've been sometimes. I'm like, I want my old mortgage back. I had peace in my life. I thought I was worried about stuff, but the biggest thing that honestly stressed me out was having to take my toddler to the grocery store by myself. That was my biggest, anxiety back then. That wasn't, not that
That's a
was
little
real.
stressful.
It is stressful, where you have moments where you're like, come on, girl, that was not, that was not as bad as it could be. But you have moments where I'm like, I've literally been like, God, like if I could literally hit the rewind button, I would not do any of this. But I'm like, I still know though that we did the right thing. And so just having to trust in God when you go through seasons of feeling like maybe questioning why God allowed this, or why you kind of followed God, even though you did the right thing, being like, well, it's really hard right now. And I actually thought following you was going to just make it easy. But honestly, where in the Bible does it say that? Nowhere. And we can look at many evidences and many stories in the Bible where Moses or David or Joseph or whoever followed God, and it wasn't perfect all the time. But just because it wasn't perfect all the time didn't mean that God was there. The other day, my grandmother looked at me, and she knows about obviously everything we've been going through. And I was kind of sharing more, and I feel like I talked to her all the time about all of this. And she just looked at me and said, you're in a wilderness season, but the thing about the wilderness is God didn't just put you there. He's there with you in it, and he hasn't left you. And something about when she said that to me was just such an eye-opening thing of like, sometimes when you feel in the wilderness, you feel almost like abandoned.
Yep.
Like I'm here by myself. Literally no one understands what I'm going through. Even if they think they went through something similar, they don't get it. And you feel lonely and confused and hurt. And then you feel like I just said, you're like, God, take me back. Like, don't leave me here. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. And she was just like, God got the Israelites through it. And literally on the other side was the promised land. And obviously, they were in the wilderness for 40 years, and it wasn't like a quick thing. It wasn't like in 6 months or in, 10 minutes or whatever. And sometimes your promise is maybe more delayed than you would like it to be, but it's always on God's timing and in the right time.
Oh, that
And
is so
that's
good.
something that I am truly like, I have to every day, I have to remind myself, like, no, we have evidence from God. We have a word from him directly that he's told us basically, you've done the right thing and you're going to go through this season, but also I'm going to provide for you. And it's like, why am I worrying? Like, I don't just have the Bible. I have this direct word from him. Like, why am I over here? It's just human nature. But it's like God's here with us through this journey. And I know one day when we're old and we have grandkids, we're going to tell them about this and they're going to think, I'm so glad I didn't have to go through that. It's such a positive story. I truly like think about it sometimes. I'm like, one day we're going to be older, and if we do write a book, which I really want to, because I do think there's so much that we've experienced that can help people, like church hurt to even being confused why God is allowing something to happen when you feel like you did the right thing, feeling lonely, feeling abandoned by God. Like, I mean, I feel like we've experienced all of it. And so we've just been like trying our best to just like anchor to each other, anchor to his word, anchor to the promises that he's given us, and remembering that like God's hand is on our lives. And one day, you know, if we're able to write this book, this is going to be such a huge blessing, but also we're going to have this to like show our children of like who two of them at least were here for it, to be like, this is what was happening. And look how God provided. Look at this. Like, look at this miracle that happened, and look at the ways that God, you know, even like little miracles. I don't know if y'all know that song, Million Little Miracles by Elevation.
Yep.
I love that song. And I didn't really honestly pay that much attention to it until very recently. But I'm like, that I feel like has been my life. Is like, I have all these million little miracles that have been happening from since 2023. I mean, my whole life, obviously, but especially since the beginning of 2023 when we've started walking through all of this. And it's like proof, it's literal evidence, like God is going to provide, and everything will be okay, even if it doesn't feel like it right now, you know?
That's so good.
I remember you're like, wow, okay.
Yeah,
I have a lot to say.
I relate in a lot of ways. It's like sometimes the Lord's provision can be so humbling, and that's what I've learned is like when you go through seasons like this, when you go through a wilderness season, and you feel like where are you, God? But then he shows up like little bits at a time. It can be so humbling because like sometimes you're expecting like it all to be better, like all in one big miracle.
Right.
And his like the little ways that he provides along the way, it's like it can be so humbling because it could be something as simple as like maybe you don't have like enough money to pay for groceries or like a lot of groceries or whatever, and you go through the line and then a lady behind you is like, I want to pay for her groceries, because that happened to me. I mean, I had money to pay for my groceries, but like in a harder financial season, I remember a lady just straight up was like, I want to pay for her groceries. I have cash. Here you go. And I was like, no, like don't do that. And it happened like last fall, and I was just like, I walked out of there and I just cried, and I was like, Lord, I can't believe you just did that. Like, and it's so humbling because it's like, you know, it's nothing you could have done, nothing I could have done to like make something like that happen. And when you're in those seasons, it's hard because your heart posture has to be like, I give it all to you. But like you said, it's so easy to drop back into like, I want to have control. I want to fix this. Like, because this is literally my personality, and that's where I've been for like a few years. And especially as moms, I mean, we all have toddlers, and we know how it is. Like, you have a family to provide for. And so, like, I have pulled back from my job, and I'm like, but I need to provide for my kids. Like, how can I do this? How can I fix it? How can I bring in money here? How can I do this? How can, like, how can it be perfect? And like, my heart posture has to be like, okay, no. Like, I have to, like, the Holy Spirit will bring me back and say, no, Kaitlin, like, I'm here to provide for you. You don't have to provide for yourself, because I will do that. And I don't know, it's just a really hard place to be. But I like listening to you talk was like, humble was the word that I kept like hearing and like thinking about, because I can see how like humble you've like become through this entire experience. I can only imagine like how in the midst of it, you're just like feeling crazy one day, and then like the next day you're like, no, I got to trust God. And then the next day it's like, no, I got to fix this. But like, I can see the Lord like taking you and like molding you, but also humbling you. And I think it's really cool that you're like letting him do that, and that you're like, you've brought your heart posture into a place of like allowing him to humble you and to be humble before him, and to be like, okay, God, you know what? Like, I'm surrendering this to you, and I'm not going to worry, and I'm not going to try to piece all these jobs together. I'm not going to try to like find the house. I'm not going to try to. And I mean, we fall out of that on a daily basis. And sometimes we like want to like grasp back onto like that control with like our closed fists. But I think what's cool is like on a daily basis, we get to just like open our hands and be like, okay, God, like today, this is all yours. Like, and I think it's really cool because I can see, I mean, I've known you and I've talked to you through a lot of this like life stage, and I can see that you have like a resilience in you, and like the Lord has like sustained you and placed strength in you And it's just really cool to hear. And
Yeah. I think the whole time you were talking from the very beginning, the word I just kept hearing was obedience, and how
preach it.
yours and your husband's obedience was more than just for you guys. And that's the cool thing about listening, having a front row seat to hear people's stories, because while you're in the thick of it and you're walking through it, we get to listen and we get to just see how, like Kim was saying, how God provided, how he took y'all's obedience and blessed other people. I mean, one big part is when you were talking about the selling of the house to move back here, and they started a church. You know, I look at it as if I were in this situation. We're a lot alike. Our personalities are very similar. Me and Kaitlin are very similar. And the fact of we like to have control. And when our life feels steady and consistent, we feel like we're thriving and we're like, okay, we're good. Like, we're happy, no anxiety. Like, this is great. And so in that moment, it would have been so easy to be like, no, this is crazy. Like, we're about to have a baby. Like, why would we do this? Like, we need a home. We need consistency. Like, and you cling to like what you want, but the Lord was calling you to something bigger and to call you into obedience. And if y'all wouldn't have been obedient, that might not have ever happened. And who knows what the Lord's doing there now in that home and in that church and that neighborhood. Like, you could have easily just said, no, I think we're good. We're consistent. We feel steady here. But no, he's like using it to bless other people. And so the whole thing I was hearing the whole time was like, your obedience and our obedience to the Lord is so much more than just for us. And so I'm really proud of you guys. Like, it's a big deal to trust the Lord. We always say, like, trust God. Like, that's just like a consistent theme as a Christian. Like, have faith, trust Jesus. But like, until you have to, it's not easy.
Yes.
You know, living for the world is a lot easier than living for Jesus. And so,
yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
It's like even everything we've went through before going through all of this has been so incredibly difficult that I honestly did not have a real understanding of, I don't think, how difficult life could be sometimes. So sometimes, you hear other people going through situations, and I was just, I was ignorant to it all. And so a huge lesson that we've honestly learned is, like I said earlier, our small group that we had down there was so kind and like just supportive and absolutely wonderful to us, and provided for us, and just so, so wonderful. And they would go out of their way. One night, it was the day actually my husband was told that his last day was going to be in January. That was a really hard day. And some of our like closer friends in the small group, we had told them kind of a little bit of what was going on, just because our actual meeting for small group was actually on Monday nights. And so we were in such a like bad headspace and honestly crying that we weren't going to go to small group. And so we texted them being like, hey, we're not going to be here. Like, here's kind of what's happened. We can tell you more later, but like, we just want to let you know we're not going to be able to be there. Well, they had small group, and then they drove after small group 45 minutes at like 10 p.m. to our house, and they brought us a card, flowers, and I think they brought us some like homemade cookies, and they just like sat with us for like an hour. And the guy is in medical school, and like the next day had to go to MUSC to like, what I'm saying, like they have jobs and normal, and like they stayed until like almost midnight and drove out of their way to just like be there for us. And they've continued to be there for us, and it's just like we have left that, and we've been changed people. And it's like we used to be so honestly ignorant to other people's situations, and it wasn't on purpose. It wasn't like I was intentionally thinking like I don't care about them, or like I don't want to ask them how they are, or ask them it, or like go out of my way to do something. But it's like, now that I've experienced like actual pain and hardship, I know how important it is as Christians especially to support people. That Evan and I are like, it is our duty at this point. It is our responsibility to do that for people. And so that is like a huge mission that we've made, is like, we've been changed people because of these people, and they've like supported us and been just so kind through such a hard season, that like we now try our best to just like look for people who are going through hard times and try to be that for them, because it impacted us so greatly and it just meant so much. But yeah, it's been really hard, but I also know that this season isn't like you just said, it's not just for me. It's not just for Evan. It's growing us, definitely. It's teaching us things, but also we're going to be able to share this with other people, and that's why I feel so passionate truly about like writing a book or talking about it, because we've gone through so much, and honestly I feel like there's so much good here. I'm like, I can't not share it. Like I can't not talk about this. It feels wrong. It feels almost like disrespectful to God to not bring it up. And I just know, there's a lot of good here, even what's come from it so far, but also what will come from it eventually and what will happen. And when that's done, that's going to be just like such a wonderful story to share, and be able to like have that to hopefully encourage people who are going through seasons that feel very, very alone or very hard, financially, marriage wise, life wise, even like going through a hard pregnancy. I mean, the end of my pregnancy was really terrifying, going through all of this on top of that, and so there was just a lot that we've went through that I feel like can be an encouragement to people. And so that's really why we feel like it's important to share everything.
Well, we're really proud of you for sharing. This is a story that, despite the fact that it doesn't have like a happy ending on the end of it quite yet, and that the Lord hasn't completely brought everything to fruition, like I'm really proud of you for sharing and like encouraging people who may also be in this life season, because even like hearing the way that you are, like the perspective that you have now, like looking back, so often like we see God's hand when we look back on things, more than when we were actually going through the thick of it. And I know you're still going through it, but the fact that like you see those things, I feel like is going to encourage a lot of people to like pay attention to like where the Lord is like working in their lives, and also pay attention to like where he's looked, or looking back to where he's like had his hand on things in the past when they felt like they were walking through hard things. And so thank you for sharing your heart. Before we go, I want to know, is there any like last minute like encouragement or scripture that you've clung to in this season, or anything that like if someone's going through like walking through like a really hard time financially, or like you said, pregnancy, or just anything that feels detrimental and they feel like abandoned or anything like that, is there anything you want to like share with them?
Yeah, there's really two. So the first one honestly is just like the story of the Israelites. Obviously they go through a lot of hard things, but they actually went through a wilderness season.
Yeah.
And so that's where we've been, is walking through a version of that. And it's actually been very great to read like Exodus and their story, because one, you can relate a lot and you understand truly. You're like, I understand why they were like, send us back to Egypt. Don't make me do this anymore. Even though Egypt was horrible. It's like they just, but you can relate a lot, but then you can also, one, see not what not to do and kind of like learn from them and be like, okay, well, here's what they did, and I don't want to end up that way, or I don't want to say that to God. So how can I change my mindset? How can I pray about that, change my posture? But also, again, you see also the ending, that there is a promised land there, and God does have a promise for all of us. And whether we receive that promise here on earth or in heaven, we will receive it one day. There is a good ending. There's always a good ending.
That's good.
And so just be encouraged by that. And then the other one is Matthew 6:30 says, if God cares for the wildflowers that are here today and gone tomorrow, how much more does he care for you? And actually, I have a tattoo of some wildflowers on my arm that I got when I was a teenager because I struggled with anxiety. And that verse has always kind of been an anchor for me. But I mean, really just think about it. If God provides for, a dandelion in a field or a bird that's flying around, how much more important are you? You're significantly greater to him than a piece of grass or a little flower. It's like, if he literally provides for them always, and they don't go around worrying. A flower's not worried about if it's going to rain or not. It's like, it's always provided. They always have what they need. So why wouldn't we? And it doesn't mean it's not going to be hard at times, but God has promised that he's always going to provide for us, and he's always going to be there for us.
So good.
Yeah, that's really good. I love when we put it in like context of like, you're better than a dandelion. Like, he's gonna provide for you. I mean, when you say it like that, you're like, well, duh.
Like, you're made in his image. You're not a piece of grass. This is
Yeah, and
how
I
we
mean,
start
really
preaching the
what it's
Bible.
saying is like how it literally says like how much greater are you than these things? It's like
Yeah.
God's going to provide for you, and it's going to be okay, even though it doesn't feel okay right now. He will. Another little thing. This isn't a verse specifically, but it is something that I've thought about. I definitely have days or moments where I feel a lot more discouraged than others, and when I'm in that discouragement, sometimes I have to remind myself, I'm like, this is where the devil wants me to be right now. Like he's getting enjoyment right now that I'm mad at God, or that I want to just quit this whole thing and I want to just, just I don't even know, like leave this whole situation or whatever. It's like he's enjoying that. And I have moments where I have to remind myself, like, it's easy to praise God and pray and be grateful and all of those things when everything's going really well and when you're comfortable and when you're stable. But when you're not, it can be a lot harder. And so I've really made it I've tried to be intentional with the fact that I still praise and I still worship him, even if I don't know what's going on, and even if I don't have answers, or even if it's not going the way I want it to go. Because one, that's biblical. Two, it honors God. It honestly makes me feel better. Even when I worship and I don't feel like it, it does make me feel better. It changes my heart posture. But then also, I just in my head imagine the devil like throwing a fit because he's like, that is not what I wanted her to do, and that's not how I wanted her to respond to this, and I'm mad now. And it's like I get a little bit of joy when I think about that sometimes, and I'm like, all right, but that is another thing that I try to remind myself is like that negative thought, those like that bitterness is what the devil wants. And I don't want him to get joy out of that. So I'm not doing that, so that's another thing.
That's so good. I love that. I think we think very similarly to you too. Kaitlin always says like, even when I don't feel like worshiping, like I'm still gonna make myself do it, and
I'm gonna sing till the words coming out of my mouth are just, like I believe them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so
sure.
I love everything that you said, and I have not walked through, exactly what you've walked through, but your words and how the Lord has just provided constantly in your life has been so encouraging to hear. And I know so many people that are going to just be encouraged by your words and the Lord's words and this episode. And so before we go, I want to ask if you, one, can plug yourself, tell everybody where they can find you and all the things, and then we will close the episode out in prayer if you are okay with that.
Yes, for sure. Well, you can find me on Instagram. My name is literally Elizabeth Sustar. And then also on TikTok. I think it's like Elizabeth Turner SU or something. I don't even know, but I love making
Figure it out. We'll put it in the description.
I listen, there are TikTok haters and I'm not one of them. I love TikTok and I think it's hilarious. And I probably spend a little bit too much time over there scrolling all the time, but that's where I'm at. Those two.
We'll put it in the description.
Sounds good. Okay.
All right, friend,
Do you want me to pray?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I can pray. Dear Jesus, thank you for today. Thank you for allowing all of us to get together, allowing people to listen to this episode. I hope that they are encouraged by it, whether they are walking through a season of loneliness, feeling very discouraged, feeling maybe confused about, what you're doing in their lives, and if they can trust you anymore. God, I just pray that you give them peace and that you give them comfort and also hope. It's so hard sometimes walking through a wilderness season and feeling like there's no hope, or feeling confused and feeling like maybe you're abandoned by God. But God, that you would just comfort them throughout the season, allow them to have people in their lives, whether it's strangers, friends, family, who are there for them and are able to encourage them, and that maybe they're also able to be encouraged by this word. Pray that everyone has a great week. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Such a good episode. Yeah. Such a good story. I'm glad that you wanted to share your heart. So thank you for being here, Elizabeth.
Thank you. It was so fun.
Yes, I'm so glad. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you for listening. We post new episodes every Wednesday. So come back next week And we will see you guys in the next episode.
Yes.
Bye.
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 Such a joy getting to hang out with you, and we hope that you leave this episode feeling encouraged, loved, and full of purpose.
If you enjoyed today's little chat, we would love it if you would write us a review so that we can hear how we encouraged you. And if you haven't clicked the follow button, go do that right now. Also, you can join the sisterhood by finding us on Instagram at The Refined Sisterhood.
Okay, friend, we hope you have the best day and can't wait for another deep conversation with you next week.